I've been holding on to this story for a long time. It happened when I was still in high school. I'm in my 30s now, just so you have the time frame. And I'm going to avoid using my real name or any of my friends' real names. The location itself can be found online, but I don't want to risk anyone getting in trouble, even all these years later, so no real names, just in case. Back in my hometown, there was an abandoned military base. From what I eventually found online, it had been active during World War II and the Cold War. At its peak, there were more than 200 military families living out there. It wasn't just a few buildings. It looked like a full-on neighborhood, like a small town that happened to be inside a base. I'm sure that's normal for military installations, but as a kid it always felt off. The whole village was abandoned in 1984, and it basically sat there untouched until 2014, when it was finally demolished. Growing up, you couldn't live in that area without hearing stories about it. The abandoned village was like local legend. I'd heard every kind of rumor you can imagine, everything from satanic groups meeting out there to secret experiments happening underground. When I was in middle school, I remember one night my older brother walked into my room while I had friends over and casually told us he'd been to the village. We didn't believe him at first. Then he started describing it in detail, and he looked genuinely freaked out, which I'm sure was part of him selling the story. He went on about the church, and he claimed there was a hidden door in the floor near the altar, like a trap door. Then he said he heard moaning and screaming coming from underneath it. He laid it on so thick that eventually all of us were convinced he was telling the truth. Even though it was obviously ridiculous, it added fuel to the mystery. For years, my friends and I built the village up in our heads. We'd talk about it nonstop and promise that once we were old enough to drive, we'd finally go look for it ourselves. All through high school, we talked about doing it, but we never actually went. 2 reasons. First, we didn't know the exact location. We knew it was near the airport, but that doesn't narrow it down much when half the area is posted with No Tira Paciente signs. Second, abandoned or not, it was still a military base on paper. We had no idea what would happen if we got caught. Then one cool spring night during our senior year, my friend Alex told us he knew where the entrance road was. We called him out immediately and said he was full of it. He claimed someone he knew had gone there and gave him directions. I was so sure he was bluffing that I said, "All right, let's go then." I figured we'd drive around for a while, find nothing, and call it a night. So around 11 p.m., we drove about 15 minutes to the general area. Alex didn't exactly sound confident once we were actually out there. Every few feet he'd tell me to pull over like, "I think this is it." And every time it was nothing. Eventually we spotted an overgrown dirt road. Alex said, "This has to be it." There was an old, beat-up No Tira Paciente sign half hidden behind branches and weeds. Since it was my car, I got nervous right away. Alex and my other friend, Nick, were completely ready to go. They didn't even seem to consider getting in trouble. They hit me with the same argument over and over. We'd been talking about this place our entire lives. So if we finally found it, why would we turn around now? They talked me into it. I eased the car onto the dirt road slowly. At one point, I even shut my headlights off and basically let the car roll forward, trying not to announce ourselves to the world. Not long after that, we started seeing furniture dumped along the roadside. Beds, dressers, tables, random household stuff. Like someone had tried to move out and gave up halfway. Then we reached one of those checkpoint gates that swings up and down. There was no guard booth activity, obviously, so I got out and lifted it by hand. That's when the vibe shifted. We drove a little farther and hit a second gate. This time I made Alex get out and raise it. Once we passed that last checkpoint, we were in the village, and it felt unreal. After hearing about this place for years, actually being there felt like walking into something you weren't meant to see. It was like a neighborhood. Streets, buildings, houses. But the whole thing looked wrong. Like it belonged in some alternate version of reality. So if you've seen Stranger Things, it reminded me of the Upside Down. I parked in front of the church. We got out, kept our voices low, and started exploring. One thing I noticed immediately, I didn't see any cameras. That calmed me down a little, because I'd been expecting motion sensors or something. We went into the church first. It was trashed, graffiti everywhere. I even checked near the altar for the trapdoor my brother used to talk about. No surprise, nothing. No secret basement door. Just an empty, vandalized church. After that, we moved on to the houses. That part was worse. It wasn't like a spooky abandoned shack. It was real housing. Like families had lived normal lives there. Some units looked like a storm had ripped through them. Others were strangely intact. And honestly, the intact ones were more disturbing because it felt like you could walk in and find someone's life frozen in place. Our friend, Scott, was with us too, and he was panicking the entire time. He kept insisting someone else was there. Scott was always the jumpy type, so we brushed it off and told him the setting was messing with his head. Then we were inside one of the houses when all of us stopped at the same time. We heard a sound, something that didn't feel like a normal, abandoned house noise. It was wood creaking, but not like settling. It sounded like footsteps on floorboards. I asked everyone if they heard it. They did. Instead of staying quiet, Alex called out, loudly, asking if anyone was there, and immediately the sound stopped. We stood there for a minute, trying to explain it away. Alex and Nick were convinced it was just an old structure making noises. Scott was positive we weren't alone. Either way, I told everyone I was done and wanted to leave. I didn't like being there. My gut was screaming at me to go. Alex and Nick clearly wanted to keep exploring, but I was the driver. I told them we were leaving. As we moved toward the front door, Scott suddenly flinched and stepped back. He pointed silently at a side window. On the wall outside, we could see shadows, 3 distinct head and shoulder silhouettes moving near the neighboring house. Everything in us went quiet. Those weren't random shapes. They moved like people. I crept to the window and looked outside. The shadows shifted out of view, disappearing into the backyard of the house we were standing in. I whispered that we needed to sprint to the car. Everyone nodded. We burst out the front door and ran for my car as fast as we could. When the car came into view, Scott, who was ahead of us, screamed at the top of his lungs. Standing by the open back door of my car was a tall woman in an old-looking black dress. It was filthy, like it had been worn for years. The back door was open, and she had one leg inside like she was about to climb in. The second Scott screamed, she let go of the door and bolted into the church. We didn't stop. We ran straight to the car. I checked the back seat before I even fully got in. Thankfully, it was empty. Then we all piled in and I drove out of there as fast as I could. I was going so fast on the dirt road that I actually fishtailed and almost lost control. That night we argued about what we'd seen. The obvious explanation is that there were squatters out there. Homeless people using abandoned buildings for shelter. That makes sense up until you ask why that woman was trying to get into my car. And what messes with me is we'd been walking around for a while and hadn't seen a single sign of anyone. No movement, no voices, nothing, until right when we decided to leave. Scott always claimed he'd sensed it earlier. I still don't know if that was him being paranoid, or if he picked up on something we didn't. Years later, I told my girlfriend, now my wife, the story. She suggested we look up the place and see if it still existed. That's when I found out it had been demolished in 2014. It's crazy, because growing up we could never find anything about it online. That lack of info only made the rumors bigger. Now there's way more documented history about it, which makes it feel less mythical. But what happened that night still doesn't sit right with me. I'm just glad we left when we did, and that Scott screamed when he did. 10 seconds later, and who knows what could have happened. When my wife and I first started dating, we were reckless. Not in a hurt people way, more like a bad decisions way. We'd explore abandoned places looking for ghosts. I never really believed in any of it. That was more her thing. I mostly went because I liked her, and it was something we did together. Out of all the buildings we ever went into, there's only one moment that left me completely speechless. It was one of those nights where it's pitch black because the sky is clouded over. No moon, no ambient light, just darkness. She found this old house sitting by itself, not near anything. It looked like it was barely standing. I was never scared of ghosts so much as I was scared of floors collapsing under me, and this place was especially bad. The front door was boarded up, and I had to kick it in. Inside, what I assumed used to be the living room had a huge section of floor missing. Like a massive hole. We shined flashlights down and could see what was left of the basement. I told her immediately we should leave because it wasn't safe. She didn't care. Her favorite line in those moments was always, "Just give me 1 minute." She moved around carefully, watching for weak spots. I stayed near the entrance because I didn't trust the floor. She laughed and called me a coward. After a few minutes, my curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped farther in, following her into another room. It was packed with junk, stacked almost to the ceiling. She started digging through it like she always did, hoping to find personal items left behind. I wanted nothing to do with that. She told me I should check upstairs. And before I could even argue, she hit me with, "If we search the whole house faster, we can leave faster." So I reluctantly went up. Every step felt like a gamble. At the top of the stairs, there was a bedroom to the right. I went in. There was still a bed in there. The bed was made. At the foot of it was a bathrobe, folded neatly like someone had just set it there. It felt depressing, like whoever lived there didn't pack. Didn't move, just vanished. There was junk everywhere, clothes, old furniture, little objects falling apart with time. In the corner was a crawl space, exactly the kind of place you sometimes find interesting stuff. I crawled in. It was packed with baby-related supplies, old boxes of diapers, baby food, all unopened or half ruined, covered in dust and webbing. Some of it had been chewed by rodents. The smell was awful. As I started backing out, I heard creaking. I scanned the crawl space with my flashlight and noticed another opening I hadn't seen at first. I crawled toward it and looked in. It was a narrow passage that ran across the house toward the other bedroom, like a hidden path between the walls. And the creaking was definitely coming from that direction. The passage was too tight for me to fit through, so I climbed out and decided to approach the other bedroom from the hallway instead. Down the hall to the left was the second bedroom. The creaking got louder the closer I got, until it was unmistakable. My heart was pounding, but honestly I wasn't thinking ghost. I was thinking raccoons or something. When I reached the doorway, I stepped in and almost fell. A woman was sitting in a rocking chair facing the window. The chair's back was toward me. I could see the top of her head in the shape of a long skirt hanging down. The chair rocked steadily, back and forth, back and forth. I tried to catch her face in the dark reflection of the window, but it was too dim to make out any features. I took one step in. The floor creaked. Instantly, the rocking stopped. I started to apologize, telling her we didn't realize anyone was inside. Before I could finish, she started rocking again, like my presence meant nothing. Instead of running, for some reason I stepped closer and asked if she was okay. Again, the chair stopped. Then she stood up slowly, and that's when I heard her voice, except she didn't speak words. She made a sound, a low vibrating hum. Then, without warning, she snapped around to face me. I panicked. I spun and ran downstairs, yelling that we needed to get out, that somebody was upstairs. My girlfriend laughed like I was messing with her. I begged her not to go up, but she brushed past me, determined to prove I was lying. I followed her, practically panicking, watching her walk down the hallway toward the bedroom. When she hit the doorway, I heard her say, "Oh my God." I ran to her. And then she started laughing again. Inside was the rocking chair, but the woman was gone. She joked that I was afraid of an empty chair. I insisted the woman had been there seconds earlier, but she kept laughing and walked away, finally agreeing we could leave. We were heading back toward the stairs when we both heard it. Creak, creak, creak. The rocking chair again. She froze and looked at me like her brain couldn't process it. She mouthed, "What is that?" Then she stepped toward the bedroom, and we heard the humming. A melody, quiet and steady. She reached the doorway and saw it herself, someone sitting in the chair humming. This time she didn't say a word. She turned and ran. We ran out of the house into the car. Once we got in, she started screaming, asking what the hell we'd just seen. I didn't even have an answer, I just drove. I wanted to look back and check the upstairs window as we pulled away to see if a figure was standing there watching. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. To this day, I can't explain it. Maybe it was something paranormal. I know how unlikely that sounds. Or maybe it was just an elderly woman living in a collapsing, filthy house. But that explanation doesn't sit right either, because the place was boarded up and half the living room floor was missing. It didn't look survivable. Not long ago, I asked my wife if she still remembered it. Of course she did. We drove back to the area, and the house was gone. Completely torn down. No debris, no foundation, nothing. I still replay that night in my head, trying to remember her face. I keep telling myself it was just a person, but my gut tells me it wasn't. When I was in middle school, my family moved into a new house. For a teenager, it was perfect, bigger than our old place, tons of kids in the neighborhood, everything was great. Except for one neighbor. He was the stereotypical angry old man. If we played football outside and even got close to his yard, without stepping onto it, he'd lose it. He'd slam on the window and scream at us from inside to get away from his property. As an adult, I get wanting kids to stay off your lawn. The difference was, we were actually good kids and we respected boundaries. It didn't matter. The second we came outside, he'd start raging like he'd been waiting for us. That went on for about 6 months after we moved in. Then one day it stopped. No yelling, no banging on the window. Nothing. I even joked that he must have died, because why else would he suddenly leave us alone? About a month later, my friend Joel slept over. We woke up while it was still dark outside. Don't remember the exact time, but we heard commotion next door. Siren lights were flashing through my window. We looked out and saw 2 people carrying a zipped-up body bag out of the neighbor's house. It hit me in a way movies never could, and I felt guilty because we joked about it. And then it turned out he really had died. I couldn't stop thinking that he might have been dead in there for weeks before anyone found him. I didn't know that for sure, but the idea stuck in my head. After that, the house didn't just sit empty, it stayed abandoned. All his stuff was still inside. Apparently he had a son, but the son lived out of state and didn't come back. It's depressing when you think about it. For years, from my bedroom, I could look into parts of that house. It was right next door, and the layout made it easy to see through certain windows. And it was creepy knowing someone had died in there. I'd mess with my friends by calling it haunted. Joel, the one who saw the body bag with me, was easily spooked, so I'd tell him I saw the old man's ghost just to get a reaction. He'd cover his ears and tell me to stop, and everyone would laugh. I liked being a troll back then, especially with an audience. One night, Joel finally snapped and dared me to go inside the abandoned house. I didn't love the idea, because it was obviously breaking in. I said that. Joel turned it around and started calling me a coward and worse. I thought about it and decided it probably wasn't a huge deal if I just walked through quickly. It had been abandoned for years. Nobody would notice. So I went next door. The front door was locked. I tried forcing it and even tried kicking it in, but I was like 130 pounds at the time. It wasn't happening. Next to the door was a small window. I checked it, and to my surprise it slid open. I looked back to make sure no one was watching, then climbed inside. The first thing that hit me was the smell. It was the kind of smell you can't confuse with anything else. It smelled like death. I started gagging and pulled my shirt up over my nose. And everything inside was left exactly the way he'd abandoned it. In the living room near a recliner there was a book, still marked with a bookmark like he planned to keep reading. It made my skin crawl. I walked into the kitchen and the smell got worse. I had this thought that maybe he'd died in there. There was a small table, a sweater hanging off one chair, and a coffee mug sitting like it had just been used. On the stove were pots and pans covered in dust. I checked them. Nothing inside, just grime and time. I headed into a narrow hallway. The first room on the left was the one I could see from my bedroom. I stepped inside and looked out the window. My friends were watching from my house, waving like idiots. Joel looked shocked I'd actually gone in. While I was waving back, I heard a loud bang, somewhere deeper in the house. Not a subtle creak, not wind, a heavy, solid impact, like a person slammed into a wall. I froze and listened, waiting for another sound. Nothing. I looked back at my friends and they looked confused, like they didn't understand why I'd stopped moving. At that point, I was done. I didn't explore any further. I got to the front door, unlocked it, and left. Back at my house, I told everyone about the smell and the bang. We talked for a bit, but it eventually faded into the background and we moved on. Later that night, after everyone had fallen asleep, Joel woke me up. He whispered that he couldn't sleep because he kept hearing noises from the old man's house. I brushed him off immediately and told him his mind was messing with him. Then, during the silence, we heard it. 2 loud knocks, spaced close together. Joel sat up like he'd been waiting for me to hear it too. He said that was exactly what he'd been hearing every few minutes. I got up and looked out my window toward the neighbor's house. It was dark and I couldn't see much. Then Joel asked me what was standing in the doorway of the room I'd been in earlier. There was a shape there human-sized, like a silhouette. I tried to rationalize it. I told him it had to be something inside the room, like a coat rack or furniture. But Joel freaked out, swearing it just moved. His reaction woke the other guys up. They looked out, and to my surprise, they agreed with Joel. I was still arguing when Joel screamed again and just pointed. Now the figure was at the window, standing directly in front of it. It was still too dark for details, but the outline was unmistakably a person. Everyone started panicking. While we watched, the figure moved again, walking back toward the doorway, and then it faded into the darkness like it blended into the room. We kept watching for minutes after that, but nothing else happened. At the time, the only explanation I could think of was that the old man's son had finally returned. I said it mostly to calm everyone down, because nobody was going to sleep otherwise. We stayed up the rest of the night checking the window constantly, but we never saw it again. About a year later, I actually met the son. He came with a dumpster, cleared the entire place out, and sold the house right after. My dad talked with him and later told me the guy had a terrible relationship with his father. He said it took him years to bring himself to come back and deal with the house. To this day, that night is still the scariest thing I've ever seen with my own eyes. And what really gets me is that I wasn't alone. Multiple people saw the same thing at the same time. I know the brain can play tricks on you, but it's hard to shrug it off when everyone's describing the same silhouette in the same window. My friends and I still try to meet up once a year, even though we're spread across different states now. And every single time we do, this story comes up again. I'm sure there's a logical explanation. I just don't know what it is.